back to the My Healing Journey. On today's episode, I would like to go over my dad passing away, how I handle that, and how I'm still processing the loss of losing one of my parents. It's hard, and if this episode reaches you, I hope that you're doing well, and I hope that you find something in here that can help you through the grieving process. So, I just want to go over really quick how my parents met and then continue the story from there all the way up to how my dad passed away and how I handle that and things like that. So, my parents met while my mom was in college because she was friends with the woman that was dating one of my dad's friends. So, they all got together and they met and they just hit it off. And I want to say about a year and a half, maybe 2 years into them being married or them dating, that they got engaged. Um, not sure the time frame, but they got engaged pretty quick. So he would come down, he would see us, we would do fun things like go to the park and things like that. We went to fairs. He came down when we were trick or treating. Um, it was fun. I mean, I didn't have a dad. I mean, I had my grandpa, but at the time, my biological father really didn't see us much or really talk to us that much. So I didn't have much of contact with him. So it was nice to kind of have that father figure. And then we eventually moved in with him into the apartment that he was living in. And so we moved in there for a little bit, I'm not sure how long. And then we moved to another place that was big enough to fit all of us. And around that time, my mom found out that she was pregnant with my baby brother. I want to say 10 at that time. So, um, it was really exciting. There was going to be a baby and it was going to be fun. And so my dad, my aunt, and my Grammy, we all kind of planned a surprise baby shower for my mom, and she didn't know, which was exciting because um she was surprised. So we did that. And then my grandparents came down when my baby brother was born. So my parents got to pick the date because my mom had a C-section. So they picked when my little brother was going to be born. And I still had to go to school, which sucked because I wanted to be there, but I had to go to school. So I did. And then after he was born, my grandparents came and picked us up. We went to the hospital and we got to see our little brother and hold him and just see how cute he was and make sure mom was doing okay and dad was doing okay and bringing them, clothes and stuff that they needed. And so we got to do that. And then he got to come home and had a little welcome sign for him and everything. And he was just like tiny. He was just, uh, he was my little brother, he was a baby. And so we would bring him in and to school and be like, "This is my little brother." My sister was really young at the time, so she was like, "That's my baby." That's my baby. So she would have everybody come in, or she would have my mom come in with Tyler or my little brother when they went to pick us up from school, and she'd be like, "Come show the class my baby." So we helped out a lot. Um, he didn't like my one of my dad's friends. I think it was because my dad's friend had really long hair and a really long beard, and my dad didn't. My dad had short hair and like a short beard. So I think that was one of the reasons. He was just kind of a little afraid of him until my little brother kind of kept getting older. And my mom had this penguin. It was like a big penguin. It was one of the three penguins from Madagascar because my mom loves penguins. And so my little brother loved that penguin when he was little. He would play with that. And so we moved when I was 11, I want to say, because I think my little brother was about 1 when we moved to the new house. So we moved to a new house that was big enough for all of us, had a big backyard and everything. Um and it had a floor to ceiling window. Um and but my dad took that out and like replaced it with a smaller window that he liked and that my mom liked. There was a pool in the um patio, and it was an in-ground pool, but it was kind of destroyed and dilapidated, so we kind of had to replace it. My dad found out that how expensive it was going to be to replace the in-ground pool or to have it filled in, and my dad found that it would be cheaper to take an above ground pool and put it in the in-ground pool spot. So that way, um, we used the space and then he built a little wooden like deck around the pool where the pool didn't actually meet the side of the concrete, so there was about that much of a gap. And so he built a like a wooden area around it so nobody fell in, and we had a pool. And so we had to put up the fence that goes around it. And then my dad built like a roof over where the patio furniture sat. So they kind of had shade, and he had his grill and everything. And so my dad would like to, kind of throw parties and things like that. And so we did a lot of parties for 4th of July, Memorial Day, just kind of have picnics. Because that's something that my dad liked to do. My dad liked to do poker nights. He was really good. He usually ended up either winning or at least being one of the two that was in the last round. So he was pretty good. And we would do like yard work and stuff like that. And so like the neighborhood that we lived in was kind of quiet and peaceful, so we got to run around, hang out with friends. We had a little wooded area in the neighborhood that we kind of went and played in and just walked around and explored. We have a river out behind the house, so we would go and we would like play in the river and we would fish and we would go kayaking or like canoeing, and the neighbors had a giant inflatable raft, so we would just get on the raft and we would float down the river, and then her parents would come and pick us up because they actually lived in the same neighborhood too. um and then we also had our own volunteer fire station which was pretty cool. The old fire building now is being turned into a house, and they actually built a brand new one that was a lot bigger. There was our own little tiny park that we got to play in. Our yard was pretty huge, so we had like 4 wheelers um that we could ride around in our little park, and then our neighbor next door had a go-kart and he built like a little go-kart track so we could play on that, or we can ride on that. We would play um football out down in our yard or out at the park. Um, we would play like hide and go seek or like manhunt. So we would split into teams, and that team had to go find the other people. And we would use the entire neighborhood as like our like anywhere we can hide. So it was fun. We would have like bonfires and sit outside and just talk and kind of hang out. That was one of the things my dad liked to do was bonfires. And so we would do that, especially like in the fall time. And the neighbors would come over. Um, it was a blast. Um, like I said, my dad liked to have parties and he was really fun. One time they were having a party. My dad and his friend were drunk, and so we have a hill that kind of went down into the yard. Um, and so my dad kind of rolled down the hill because he was drunk. I'm not sure why they went down in the backyard, but they did. And so my dad's friend's wife, um, I call her auntie, and my mom got water guns, and they were shooting them at my dad and my uncle. And my uncle picked up a sled to cover himself. My dad lifted up his shirt and to cover his face and thought that was going to protect him. It did not. So he got all wet. And so my dad was very big into football. So we would have like kickoff parties. We would host Super Bowl sometimes, so it would kind of just go around in the friend group on who's doing what. And my dad was in a fantasy football league with his friends. And so they would get together and they would have what is called fantasy draft day. And I put air quotes around fantasy draft day because it's not like the actual draft, but it was a whole big thing for them and they treated it like it. And so one year my mom my mom joined because they needed one person. I don't want to say have to. She did. So she was never really into football like that. Like she knows about football, she knows penalties and things like that because she grew up watching it with my grandpa, who was a Bills fan. But she didn't know like their stats and their throwing percentages and what all of that meant. So she was just gonna be there to be that one person so they could do their fantasy league that year. My dad was trying to help my mom and stuff, and he kind of did, but my mom's theory was if I like the jersey, I'm gonna play this person. And it worked. She won that year. Like she beat everybody, so they had to bring her alcohol. That was their thing. Whoever wins, you have to buy, everybody in the league had to buy her or that person their favorite alcohol drink. So my mom won. I want to say on sheer luck. I don't know. But it was funny when his friends would come over and they would see like Robin won again and they just be like, "How are you doing this?" And my mom's like, "I don't know. I just am." So she did pretty good. Football was one of the things that me and my dad watched together. And my dad wasn't a Teams fan. He was a Peyton Manning's fan. So it didn't matter what team Peyton got put on. My dad would be a fan of that team because of Peyton Manning. So from the time I've known him up until Peyton Manning was not drafted, but picked up by another team. He was a Colts fan. And then Peyton went to the Denver Broncos. Yep, went to the Denver Broncos. And so my dad became a Broncos fan. And then when Peyton retired, he didn't really kind of like have a team. He was kind of like in that limbo kind of state. And then eventually he just kind of drifted towards the 49ers. Um, because they had some really great players, past and present. And I thought it was funny because my dad would always talk so much crap about the 49ers because he had two friends that were big 49ers fans. So I I thought it was hilarious. And his game room was set up with um a lot of Peyton Manning stuff and some San Francisco 49ers stuff and tons of Mets things. My dad was big with the Mets. That was his thing. For baseball. He did not like any other team. He was big with the Mets. He definitely didn't like the Yankees. So that was interesting because my sister was a Yankees fan, and I think my dad's friend was a Yankees fan. So they clashed. And he would watch football. So those were his two main sports. And then we would watch the Olympics every year, summer and winter. Um and my dad would kind of have some friends come over and we would sit down and we would watch it. My poppy would always come over, which is my dad's dad. And so we would kind of sit down and we would watch it. And so we did a lot of that. My dad met some friends here in the neighborhood. And so they got him into hunting, which he went and did um during the fall. And so the first party they went to with those friends was a tattoo party. And so this is how my dad became friends with a talented tattoo artist. And so the first ever tattoo that my dad got was right here on his arm, and it was a skull with a jester's hat. And instead of the bells that usually are on the jester's hat, it was skulls. And then after that, I want to say his next one was my little brother's name and birthday on his arm here. And then his next one was a giant back piece of dragons because my dad had a thing for dragons. Um, so we would get him little statues and figurines and stuff like that because he liked dragons and mooses. I don't know why, but he did. So he had a giant back piece with dragons on it. It was it was pretty cool. And so that was a couple parties he got them done. He actually went into that friend's tattoo studio for his back piece. And so yeah, he one time from hanging out with the friends down the street, got drunk, walked home, and then decided to mow the lawn. Yes, my dad decided to mow the lawn while he was drunk. So we have our house sits up on top of a hill. It's not like a big hill, it's just like kind of it's a little one, so you just kind of go down. So my dad was on the riding lawnmower, and I don't know how this happens because he usually is very good about mowing the hill, like kind of like sideways. He tipped over the riding lawnmower, got back up, looked around, made sure nobody was looking or nobody saw him, picked the riding lawnmower back up, started it, and continued mowing. While it was smoking, he just continued to mow. Didn't do a very good job, but he continued to mow. And then once he was done, he came back up to the house. Yep. And then the next day, my dad's like, "Who mowed the lawn?" And we're like, "You did." And he's like, "No, I didn't." We're like, "Yeah, you did." So he didn't even like, it didn't register that he was the one to mow the lawn until he gets out. And then the lawnmower wasn't really working. And then that's when he realized he's like, "Oh, yeah, I did that. No wonder why my back hurts." Like, of course, dad, it's gonna hurt. And my dad was big with riding motorcycles. So, he's the reason that I learned to ride motorcycles and I have my motorcycle license. So we would go for motorcycle rides like all the time. We went on a charity ride called Bikers Heart Boobies, and it was for breast cancer awareness. So we paid um to go for on the ride, and then every place we stopped, um whatever we bought, they would give a percentage um to the people who put on the ride, and then so they that can go to breast cancer research. So we went on that. Um, we did Toys for Tots one year, um, which was really fun. And I got to go and help my dad pick out toys for the kids. And Toys for Tots is a ride where um motorcycle people get together. You get there's a specific age range, and then you get one toy for a girl, one toy for a boy. And so you start at can't remember the location, and you go all the way down to you get to the mall. And there's like vendors, and there's like things for you to ride and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a little mini fair type thing. And then at the end, they would have fireworks. And it's something that happens every year. And a lot of the businesses put little boxes and stuff out so that way even if you don't ride motorcycles, you can still donate toys for the Toys for Tots, which is pretty cool. So my dad would do that, and I got to go with him. um he surprised me with a new helmet. It was purple with dragons on each side because I was outgrowing the one that we had. So, um, he surprised me with that one day after school, which I was really excited for. And I asked him, I'm like, can we go for a ride now? And he was like, tomorrow. And I was like, okay. So we went for a ride, and his friends also had motorcycles, and my aunt had her own. So she had her own motorcycle and everything. So I grew up, you know, with her and being next to her and like seeing that like she can do it. Like that's what I wanted to do. I'm like, I want to ride a motorcycle. So my first ever motorcycle was a matte black Honda Rebel, and I love that bike. I was so sad when I sold it because when me and my ex moved to one of our places up toward the Adirondacks, I couldn't ride my Honda Rebel around there because they had trails. So I had to get a dual sport, which is both a off-road and on-road bike. So legally in New York, I could have rode this bike on dirt roads and trails and on the street. So it looked more like a dirt bike than it did a regular than like a motorcycle. So I had to get one of those so I could be able to ride because that was one of the things that I enjoyed was riding. And so I'll admit I was very sad when I had to sell it. And me and my dad didn't get to enjoy a ride together, which kind of sucks because that was one of the things that I wanted to do with him was to go for a ride on our motorcycle. So every time I would go out, and especially after he passed away, I would think of him, and it just kind of felt nice to just be there with him and to like know that he's there with me and this is something that we both enjoyed. So my dad really enjoyed motorcycles, and he had since um my mom first met him. And so I've been around motorcycles my whole life. I helped my dad clean his motorcycle. I helped my dad put on some of the decals that he had on his bike. I helped him put some other stuff on his bike and do all the fluids and stuff like that. I helped him with the cars because we would change our own brakes and do our own oil and stuff like that. So I would help him with that. And my dad was very good with woodworking. Like he was really good. So he built all of the cabinets that are in the kitchen in my mom's house. He built all of them. And so I got to knock down some of the cabinets, which was fun, and put them and how you help put them up. And then my dad helped me make a picture frame because when I was in school, I made a painting for my mom, and he and I made a picture frame so we could put the painting in there. And that's what I gave my mom for Mother's Day was that painting. It had four hearts with roses around it, and it had each one of the kids' names um, on the hearts. And she loved it. It's still actually hanging in the house. And so we did that. My dad put in all of the wood flooring in the house. If he and my poppy were working together, no matter if my poppy was even working with him, you can always bet that my dad was gonna like at least cut himself. And it happened more times than I can count. When my grandparents moved down here to be closer to us, especially to be closer to my grandpa's doctors, my dad and I re-put in redid the flooring in their kitchen, and they were tiles. So I get to help my dad put those tiles in, which was really fun. And I helped with like the flooring and stuff like that. And so he was good with a lot of that kind of stuff. And then if he didn't know how to do something, one of his friends usually knew something. So if they helped us, we would usually, my dad would pay for the part, and then my mom would like make them whatever they wanted. And my mom made this bean dip that everybody loved. So it was either they would either ask for her macaroni salad or bean dip. And her bean dip took 2 days to make. So she would have to start it the night before the party and then um make it finish it the next day, which is so she'd prepare it all the night before and let it sit in the fridge. And then when they get ready to leave, she would drain a lot of the juice and stuff out of it and then put it in a dish and take it, and they loved it. That was her thing that she would um make. So that's usually how a lot of the stuff got done because a lot of them were very good with um all of that stuff. So my dad's friends like to go golfing, and my dad had never really gone golfing until his friends started getting into it. And so my dad went with them, and he started to become really good, which kind of upset my dad's friends. Not really, like it was a joke, running joke that every time my dad would go out, he would always get better. But my dad also would go to the driving range a lot. So he of course he practiced and everything. And my dad was pretty good to like I'll admit it, he was good. And his friends also did drink while playing golf, so that also didn't help that they weren't really as good. I went a couple times with them, but I just kind of sat in the golf cart and I drove them around, which was fun. So I don't really know how to play golf. That was my brother and my dad's thing. Um, so they played golf together, And me and my dad's thing was more like motorcycles and movies and stuff like that. Because we liked a lot of the same movies and found a lot of the same things funny. So one year, when I couldn't go trick-or-treating anymore, my dad and I stayed home, and he surprised me with this. We stayed home and we watched all of the Halloween movies, including the Rob Zombie Halloween. And we had pizza because we usually ordered pizza anyway, um, on Halloween. So this is like the first year that I couldn't go trick or treating. And so we had candy and everything, and we stayed up. We watched a bunch of horror movies, like almost we watched all of the Halloween, including Rob Zombies. And if we couldn't do that during Halloween, we would watch it on like a Saturday, um, another week. So we would do that. Um, Thanksgiving was always there was always we would always watch the Thanksgiving Day parade, and then there would be football games. So we would always watch the football games, and then my mom and my Grammy and my aunt and my grandma would always go out for Black Friday, starting Thursday, and then they would be out for till Friday. I went with them one year, and then after that, I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm I'm not gonna do that. So they would do Black Friday shopping starting Thursday. So after we would have dinner, or I would say about lunch dinnerish, because it was around 1, 2 ish when it'd all get done. They would sit down and they would look through all of the places that had Black Friday deals and stuff like that. And if one started like at on Thursday, Thanksgiving, they would go. So there was that. They would do that. Christmas, we would always watch the same movies. It would be on Christmas Day. My dad would um put on How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the Jim Carrey one, because that's the one that my poppy liked. Um, it had to be that one, which I agree with him. The Jim Carrey one is pretty good. Jeff Dunham's Christmas special, because my dad loved Jeff Dunham. And then National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, because my dad liked that one, and A Christmas Story, because I think that was my poppy's favorite, or maybe it was my grandpa's. One of those two. So those would be the four that we'd watch. If we were opening presents, he would put on Christmas music. He really liked Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You, so that was always on the list of Christmas musics we would listen to. And then um as I got older, especially when I turned 21, me and my mom would Christmas Eve, we would wrap the presents that were for some people that she didn't get to wrap and everything. And her and I would sit down and we would drink wine and we would wrap presents, and my dad would be there watching one of the movies that he watched 1,000 times already and just laugh at us, because we were wrapping presents while drinking wine and just kind of having a good time and matching in our little Christmas pajamas. And we would put the stockings together, and we just have a good time. And my dad thought it was funny. My dad really liked um Gabriel and Grace Glacius, so he thought Gabriel was pretty funny. So we would watch a lot of his comedy specials, and I did too, because Gabriel was pretty funny. And so we did a lot of comedy specials. Me and my dad were kind of into the holiday horror type thing, because why not? Like, it's like all of these movies are all the like most of them. If like you watch Hallmark Channel, it feels very like unrealistic Christmas, like over happy and things like that. So like me and my dad would kind of watch those stuff too when they started coming out, like My Bloody Valentine. Um, there was a couple horror Christmases movies that me and my dad watched together. Um, so we kind of watched that, and my dad was very big with collecting movies. So we had this giant movie shelf, um, full of hundreds of movies, especially movies that he already previously had. So if my dad liked the movie, he would buy it on DVD. And that's something that I've carried over to. If I like the movie, I buy it on DVD. So we had a tons of movies um that we could choose from and that we could watch, and that was something my dad liked. My dad also liked to read, and he was one of the big reasons that I read like I do. And so he um got me into reading different things. Harry Potter is one of my favorite books. Um I love that series. I've read it. I've read it to my little brother. Um I've tried to read Lord of the Rings and I can't do it. And I can't sit through Lord of the Rings movies. I fall asleep. I tried. It's not something that I could do. My dad loves Lord of the Rings, and he had all the book collections, so that was something that he did. I got into Anne Rice, like the Interview with a Vampire, and all of that. I've read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I like that one. My dad was very big into like sci-fi stuff, and I didn't really particularly care for more of like the sci-fi things. So usually my genre was like as a kid growing up, my genre was more of like Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief because I really like Greek mythology. So I would read a lot of Greek mythology stuff. My dad actually had a really old um book for Greek mythology. It was a first edition, which I have um sitting on a shelf being very protected. And he let me read that. And so I got to read Greek mythology, and I liked reading about like vampires and werewolves and things like that. For a kid who had anxiety growing up and had a lot of pressure on them, especially when it comes to having to help take care of my siblings and help make sure the house was taken care of and cleaned, and I had to grow up pretty fast when I was a kid. Reading those kinds of fantasy books was like an outlet for me. It was one place where I could have peace, where I could just go live into a story that wasn't something that you know, that I had to do. It was like an escape. And so those were the things that I read. Um, my dad was tired of buying me books every other day, so he bought me a Kindle. And that was one of my Christmas presents. Because I had asked for the first book of the Vampire Academies because I wanted to read it. And so he had actually gotten me the entire set, which I still have, and he got me a Kindle. So he didn't have to buy me any more books because I read a lot. So I got my little brother into reading. One of the first books that I read to him, aside from little kid books, was Harry Potter. So I would read a chapter before he would go to bed. And so he started to get into reading. So his reading level was higher than normal because that was one of the things he and I did was reading. And I think he still reads. He asked me to borrow a couple of my books that I had, so I let him. So I think he still reads. And so that was one of our things, and we would talk about the book and discuss it, and it was really fun because that was something we would do. We would clash over math. I am not a math person. I don't do numbers. It just doesn't sit well. Like I can add and subtract and divide in like times, but if you give me numbers and letters and ask me to do all of this algebra and things like that, no, I can't do it. It just something in my brain, it doesn't click. But I'm very good with music and like creative things. That's how my brain works. Um, I used to play the viola and I can play the cello. So there was were really good. I can remember lyrics from a song. Recited it back to you. I can um some songs I know all of the words to, and if I hear a song for the very first time, I can like kind of follow along and sing with the song. And it's the same way with movies and shows that I watch and that I like Trailer Park Boys. I can remember a lot of lines from there, and sometimes it slips out into my language because I like it. Um, and same with movies and things like that. So, um, that's how I think, and I think that's why math and I did not clash. And my dad was really good with like math and numbers. He was a machinist, so he made parts for certain companies. Um so that was one of his things. He was good with like numbers and math, and obviously because he was good at, you know, woodworking and stuff, so you had to be good with numbers and things. So I was never good with that. So that was one of the things we clashed on. Um, but I was good with like history and English especially because of reading and things. So, growing up, me and my dad kind of butted heads a lot. Um, because we're the same. My Grammy one time said she may not be your biological daughter, but she acts like you. And my dad was like, "Thank you." Like, what else did you want me to say? That's my daughter. So our personalities kind of clashed sometimes, and I know I wasn't the easiest to live with, especially because I had to grow up pretty fast to take care of um kids that weren't mine and go to school. And so I missed out on a lot of opportunities, and I was going through some things that I didn't even know that I was going through until later on. I had anxiety for years, for as long as I can remember. I was continually washing my hands. And I know this because my Grammy was like, "You don't need to wash your hands every 5 minutes." And my dad would say the same thing. And so when I would get anxious and stuff, that was one of the things that I did. And so I had some undiagnosed stuff going on, and so didn't my dad. So we kind of like clashed and stuff, but once we calmed down and everything, we were cool. It wasn't all the time, I want to say, but it was pretty much. I was a very quiet, reserved kind of person, especially at home. I would, um, when my mom would come home from work or my dad would be home, I would kind of do my homework, make sure my siblings did their homework. Then I would go up in my room and read, or I would go outside with friends. Um, I didn't really hang much around my family. Um, and that wasn't because I didn't love them. I love my family, but there were certain things that were going on that I didn't particularly care for, like blatant favoritism. Like you can definitely tell that there was. And so I just kind of did my own thing, went for walks. We had our dog that we named Zeus. Well, my dad named him Zeus, and he was supposed to be my dad's dog, but he was mine. And he would sleep with me and upstairs in my room, and so I would take him for walks, and I would go for walks like myself. I would hang out with some of my friends until my best friend, my childhood best friend, started dating a guy. And then things just kind of went downhill. She kind of stopped talking to me and she kind of said some things. And then my mom went and told her mom because my mom was there and heard it. And then it kind of started this whole big thing. And then so we just kind of stopped talking. Like, it was to the point that, like, I would go to her family reunions. She would come to my family reunions. Or, like, if my Grammy wanted to go to, like, the lake, and for the day, she'd be like, "Yeah, Lena and Shelby, or Lena and her best friend can come." So I would go, and we would go. Like, it was like we didn't even have to ask if we were going. If we can stay at each other's houses. We're just like, "Yeah, we're gonna go stay there." She's like, "Yeah, I'm staying with Lena." So like, it was crazy, and like I knew her grandparents, and her grandparents one day, I was walking by, and they were sitting outside. And they're like, Lena. And I was like, hey. And they're like, yeah, we know that you and Shelby don't, or that you and her don't talk anymore. And we're sorry. And we know that it's not you. And you can still come around, say hi, we love you, and all of that stuff. And I was like, I love you guys too. And we talked for a while. And it was really nice to see them. What I didn't know was that my dad's friend's wife was actually her cousin. So I didn't know that they were related until years later. Um, so that was crazy. And so I do most of that stuff, and my dad would be okay with it. Um, and so when I got older, I graduated early from high school because where I'm from, they were combining two high schools together, and I knew that it was going to be crazy, which I was right. It was not a smooth transition, and I knew I couldn't handle that. So I doubled up on classes and I graduated a year early, which I was really proud of, and my dad was really proud of. He took off work and everything to come to my graduation, which I was really happy about. And my Grammy and Poppy came, and my grandparents came, my aunt came, and I was like excited. So I was the last graduating class of that high school, which I was super excited about. And so once I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know because I never had nobody really sit down and talk to me about like career path and the things that I can do and what colleges to go to and all this stuff. Like, I never had that person tell me that stuff, you know? So I just kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. So I got a job and I was working. And my dad said, now that you're not in school and you're working, you got to pay rent. At the time, I didn't understand what he was doing. It didn't make sense to me. I'm like, I've lived here my whole life. I'm your daughter. Why do I have to pay, you rent? But once I moved out after me and my dad had a big blow up, and it was my anxiety was getting pretty bad at that time because my grandpa was continuously getting worse. So I was having to deal with um reconciling that he was passing away. My biological father tried to get in contact with us, and so I was dealing with that on top of just like it was a whole bundle of things. And I'm the type of person that just pushes my feelings down and bottles it up until I just explode because every time I try to talk about how I feel or try to like just address issues, I always get shut down or we talk about it and they're like, yeah, okay. And then that's it. Or they just dismiss it. So it was one of those times it just exploded. We got into like a huge fight. I said some things that I shouldn't have said. I know he said some things he shouldn't have said. And so I left. And it was a really good opportunity because my grandma needed help with my grandpa. So I went to help my grandma, and I worked and I helped with my grandpa. And as I got older and removed from the situation, I understood why my dad did what he did. He was trying to prepare me for the real world, which made sense. He was like, if I'm out on my own, I'm gonna have to pay rent. So he was like, you gotta pay rent every month. And it wasn't that much of my paycheck. Um, so so I understood like that's like financial responsibility. So I understood at that, like as further got older and away. And then my dad and I sat down and we had a talk, and I apologized for the things that I did, and I was going to therapy to get help, and I got on medication for my anxiety. And so, um, as I was working on figuring out what's wrong with me, because I was tired of being angry all the time. My mom still talked to my biological father. My sister talked to him. She even went and lived with him at one point. And it, I was very, very angry about that. And I think that that was one of the reasons that I brought that into mine and my dad's relationship too, was because I was angry that all of this was happening. So we sat down and we talked, we worked it out, and we'd become closer. Um, and so me and my dad would um go for, like I said, keep going for motorcycle rides. Um, I would come up there for like football or for a weekend, or if if he went down to his friend's house down in South Carolina because they moved, or if my dad just wanted to hang out, I helped him plan one of my mom's surprise birthdays. I helped set up for one of my dad's surprise birthday parties, and we had brought his friend up from Texas, one of his good childhood friends, from Texas, and we surprised him with his friend. My dad also went to Disneyland for golf, which kind of upset me because I tried to go too, but he said no, and he didn't even bring me back a souvenir. And I was like, you go to Disney and you're not gonna bring me back something? Because I've never been to Disney and I really wanted to go. And so he's like, nope, I didn't bring you back anything. I was like, cool. Cool, thank you. And so my dad met two of his grandkids, and it was his two grandsons. And my dad loved being a grandpa. He spoiled his grandkids. Like he spoiled them. He would always just tell my sister, "Hey, I'm gonna come pick up my grandson," or invite my brother down for dinner and hang out with his grandsons. And so my dad had a little room that had like um the 49ers stuff on the wall, tons of Mets stuff on the wall because my dad was a huge Mets fan. And so they would hang out in that room, and my nephew would always just go to my dad because my nephews loved him. He loved being a grandpa. He would buy them clothes and toys and anything that they asked for. And if he was here to meet his granddaughter, I'm sure he would spoil her rotten too because he just loved being a grandpa. And so he got to meet at least two of his grandkids. So there's about five of them. So he didn't get to meet three of them. Um, which I knew he would have loved the three of them. And so, yeah, which is kind of heartbreaking because I know they would have loved him. And so I met my ex, and when my ex and my dad met, they were like this. They were really close. Their personalities matched, and everything about them was just like, yeah. So they were really close. They would drink together, and my dad liked Captain and Coke, but he liked more Captain than Coke. So if my mom ever asked me like, "Hey, can you make me another drink?" I'm like, Do you want a dad drink or do you want a normal person drink? Because a dad drink would be more alcohol than the actual chaser." So my mom was like, "Normal person drink." My mom, you can't let my dad make you a drink. I told my ex that I said, if you want a drink, ask me, I'll make it or make it yourself. Don't let my dad make you a drink. He's like, why? And I'm like, trust me, that's not something that you want. He let my dad make him a drink, and then he understood why. My dad liked more alcohol than he liked the chaser. So more Captain than Coke. And so it was for my mom's surprise birthday is when they got to actually like drink and hang out and party. And my dad had set up beer pong, so he and my ex were on one side and I was on one side with I can't remember who, and they were just like they're like "Woo," and they flashed every like people like because they were drunk, but it was hilarious. Um, that was also the time he told my mom what we got her for her birthday, even though she had already opened the gift. And he also told my family that he loved me, which he hasn't said he loved me before until then. And then so the next day he told me when he was sober, which was funny because my dad also says just random things while he's drunk too. One day my dad came in, I was babysitting, and he walks over, he goes, "Where's the baby?" Because I was babysitting my dad's friend's son. And I go, "He's over there." I'm like, "Shh, don't wake him up." And he was like, "Okay." And he was like loud. And then he was telling me how it was 2 o'clock in the morning and he wanted donuts. And he was like, "We went to Dunkin' Donuts and they were out of donuts. How do you run out of donuts when you're a donut place?" I was like, "I don't know. How does KFC run out of fried chicken?" He goes, "I don't know." And then my mom refused to let him eat the donuts in bed because they were powdered donuts. So my mom said he sat on the floor, was eating powdered donuts, getting powder all over himself, just rocking and back and forth and just singing. And yeah, my ex did the same thing when he was drunk. He just, yeah, my ex was like, "I'm gonna go hang out with the boys and see how Bubbles is doing," which is Trailer Park Boys. And I'm like, "Okay, you go do that." So they were kind of the same kind of drunks, which was really funny. And so my dad was just kind of like a goofball. He found out that my ex likes Power Rangers, so he got him a Power Ranger wallet. He got him a sweater that said "Blame it on the booze." Um, yeah, so they were just kind of two peas in a pod. Like it was funny. And so whenever we go to my mom's house, he would go hang out with my dad in the game room, and they would watch movies and talk and just kind of, hang out. And so when we first moved to our first apartment, um, we brought my dad and my mom to Texas Roadhouse to tell them that we were moving. And so my dad went out the very next day and bought us dishes. And so he bought us a dishes set. It came with bowls, plates, cups, and silverware. So he bought that and he was like, "Here you go. I'm proud of you. I hope everything works out and me know if you want us to help you move," which we really didn't. We just kind of slowly moved things to the apartment throughout the month because we didn't really need to rush it. So we slowly moved things, and he came up to visit the place. He liked it. We went to Longhorn because my dad really liked steak. That was one of his things, was steak. And my Uncle Fred, which is one of my dad's closest friends, he was really good at grilling. So he made amazing ribs, um, and steak. And so he taught me how to make steak like he does. So my dad would always be like, "Hey, can you make me steak?" Because I would always make the steak really well. Or we would make marinated steak, and then he would ask me to grill it. 'Cause that's something that I was really good at. And so we went to Longhorn um for dinner and or lunch, and then we came back, we played games, and we had a good time. And then a couple other times he came up before he moved. And so it was 2021 um when my dad passed away. So the last time I possibly could have saw him was August for my nephew's birthday, but there was supposed to be a bad storm the way that I was going, and so I didn't want to risk it because it was supposed to start by the time that I left. Um, it didn't happen, but we weren't sure about it, so we didn't want to risk it. And I didn't get to see my dad, and I still kick myself in the ass for that. So I talked to him on the phone, texted him, made plans to come see him so we can go for a ride. Well, he had gone to a charity event in, I'm not sure where, but it was for a church. So it was a golf charity event for a church. And he went, and that's where he got COVID. And so he started getting sick. They gave him medication. He got to go home. He was released from the hospital to go home. And then he had to go back in. So my dad has asthma, and he's had asthma his entire life. So he went in and he stayed for a week, and then he continued to like get worse. And my dad wasn't really religious. We never really talked about religion or if he believed in God or what he believed in. We usually talked like we didn't really, I don't want to say we talked about like beliefs, but like he didn't like wearing shoes a lot, especially outside, like in the grass and stuff, and I didn't either. And like he would always say like things happen for a reason, life has a way of working itself out, and you'll meet this person at the right time, and like just kind of those kind of things, which makes sense because like if there's something, because like how would would have met my ex, like he knew my brother for a long time, and then in that specific moment something told him to ask if he had sisters, not before he met my brother, not before that moment, that specific moment. And like, okay, so I don't really know what he believed, if he believed in God, but I found out after he passed away that for about a year and a half, he was talking to a pastor, and he was going to this church that his friend goes to. And so he started going to church, and I found out that the day before they put him in the ICU, he actually logged on to a church service and stayed for the whole duration of the church service. Which shocked me because I never knew my dad to do that. So he had to be moved to ICU. And they put tubes in his throat. He coded once, and I got that call on Sunday. And so me and my ex rushed down there to see my dad. I was able to go in that night when I showed up to see him. And so I went in. I didn't actually go in the room. I stayed outside, and he had all of these tubes and everything. Like, he had a tube in his throat for breathing. He had tubes in his arms because they were giving him um all of these different fluids and things like that. And I was asking like questions, and they were like answering, and I'm like, I just want to know, can we do this? Can we do that? Because I knew I had someone who was a nurse practitioner that I knew. And so I was like, hey, my dad got COVID. He's now in the ICU. Is there anything that I should ask them if they're doing? Because like, I wanted to know. I wanted to be sure that he was getting all these treatments and stuff. And so she was like, yeah, ask if they're giving him these certain vitamins and these things and stuff like that. So I asked, and they had already were. So I had stayed with my mom up until Friday. My dad passed away on Wednesday. Was it a Wednesday or a Thursday? Um, not, I can't remember. I think it was a Wednesday. Um, and so I stayed with my mom consistently. Um, my ex had to go back to work, which I completely understood. Like, no, I understand. Like, you go back to work, and so he did because he could do remote work. He traveled around, so so he did work in my mom's living room, so he stayed with us. But he had already scheduled um to do a setup for the job that he was working with. And so I was like, no, just go. Like, he's like, I can cancel it, redo it. I was like, no, just go. Like, there's not much that you can do here. We're still in the waiting game. Like, he was in the hospital. And so I told him to go. He's like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, like, you can just go. Like, I understand. So he went, and once he was done with that, he came and he stayed with me the whole time. And so Monday, I think it was, or Tuesday, we had a meeting with, I think I want to say, the head of critical care, um, and the pastor. So it was me, my mom, my little brother, and my ex, and we went to this meeting. They were telling us that even if they were able to clear up COVID and get everything taken care of, that they didn't know if my dad had brain activity because he coded a second time. Um, so they weren't sure if he had brain activity, and then he was getting his lung was collapsed. So, and there was like fluid. So they had to cut him open and they put a tube into his lungs. Um, and then his kidneys were shutting down. And I was like, test me, see if we're a match so I can give him one of my kidneys. And the lady was like, unfortunately, we can't do that, especially with him still being sick and stuff. It would just destroy your kidney, and there would be no reason to put you into that kind of position. So I said, okay, well, we'll wait till he gets better. And she's like, again, we don't even know if, like, his brain activity from being coded twice. And we said, okay. And my dad's specific instructions were do every life saving measure that you can. And so that's what my mom did. They gave her suggestions on what to do. And so she was just following my dad's instructions. And so she had them do um dialysis to see if that could help fix things. And it was kind of working, but I didn't have the heart to tell my mom that he wasn't going to make it. Like, even though like the doctors were so optimistic and things like that, like, it's going to be okay. And something in me just was like, it's not going to happen. Like, I was scared. Like, I knew that it wasn't going to be good and that I was going to like have to deal with it, like have to help my mom, you know, with this. And I don't know, just I knew. And so after that meeting, um, I went to see my dad. And so they had us put on shoe covers. Um, they had us put on the surgical gowns, the surgical, like the blue surgical hats that you have to like put on, um, and masks. And so me and my ex went in there to say goodbye to my dad. And seeing him like that was the hardest thing that I've ever seen. Like we prepared for my grandpa passing away. Like we knew that that was coming. But my dad, it was like he got sick and then he was out of the hospital and then he went back in the hospital and they were saying that he was fine and then he went into ICU and then so we didn't really have much time to prepare. And so my dad, who's like this big strong guy, like my protector, the person who loved me, is there with all of these needles and these machines around him and this breathing tube and like the tube sticking out of his lungs, like it just it broke me. And so I grabbed his hand and I still remember it. It was kind of warm and I could feel him kind of like tighten his hand a little bit around mine. And I looked at him and I said one of the most hardest things that I have ever had to say. And I told him, I said, I love you, Dad, and I understand if you have to go. You don't have to hold on, and everybody will be fine here. I will make sure of it. I'll look after my little brother and mom, and I'll make sure that everybody's okay. And I told him, I'm like, it's okay to go. I understand. I know you're hurting and you can't hold on anymore. If you can't, then just go. And I was like, and I will see you someday. And I love you. And I just kind of held his hand for a little bit and then I walked out and started to cry. And so we went home. And then the next day, um, I knew something in me told me like this is the final day. And I said, okay. I said my goodbyes. I told my dad that if he needed to go, then he can go. Like he doesn't need to stay, for me. Like cuz I understand like you're in pain, like I get it. I don't want you to suffer anymore. And so he passed away on September 21st, 2021. And my mom got that call. When the hospital called my mom, she walked away. I handed my little brother, or I handed my nephew over to my sister because I knew, and I was already getting my shoes on and my coat. I said, "Here, I'm gonna go with mom." And they're like, "You don't know what it is." I knew. I knew before she even said anything. And my mom is gonna be the only one in there when he passed away because you can only have two people in there. And how can you decide between four kids who gets to be in there in his last moments, you know? And so I knew I wasn't able to go in there with him. And my mom said that, like, she's like, I gotta get to the hospital. And my mom goes, I'm like, I'm coming with you. She's like, you're not gonna go into the room. I said, Mom, I know I'm not gonna go into the room, but I wanna be there with you. and my little brother said it was okay because like that was his biological father. My mom asked him, and she was like, "Yes, it's okay." So we were driving. She called his best friend to tell him, and then she called my aunt, which is my dad's sister, to come and sit with me in the waiting room. And as my mom's walking into the room, so my mom didn't think that it was going to happen. She kind of still had hope. And so I asked the nurse, I said, like he's not going to make it. Like this, he's going to pass away soon, right? And she just kind of looked at me and she's like, I'll walk with you back to the waiting room. And I started like bawling and crying and like hyperventilating. And then my aunt came, and when I saw her, I ran to her and I just cried. And she's like, "Is it gonna be okay? Like I love you." And then my mom came out. She looked at us. She started crying. She said, "He's gone." And so we just kind of got together. I She goes, "Can you call Zach and have them um come down here and call me?" And I said, "Yes, I could do that." So I called Zach. I said, "Can you come to the hospital and bring you know, my siblings and stuff?" And he was like, "Yes." And I was like, "Don't tell them what's happening." And so I called Emily, my brother's girlfriend at the time, and I said, "Can you bring Nate to earn it? It's not good." And so they all got together. The lady at the front desk would not um let them come up, even though we had permission for them. So we all went downstairs and we my mom told them. So then after that we went back to my dad's house, or we went to the house, and my aunt stayed with us and I stayed with my mom, and we kind of started getting things round, and like me and my aunt kind of did that while my mom just kind of relaxed and stuff. And so my one of my mom's friends came over to make sure she was okay. A couple of my dad's friends came over to make sure he was okay, or she was okay. And so we started getting things around, and my mom started planning his funeral. They used the same person that my grandma used for my grandpa, which is Dagan's funeral home in Hornell. Um I was there with my mom when they did all that. Um they picked out his urn that he was gonna be in. Um and my sister found out she was pregnant around that time. So that was gonna be her second kid. And so they they got everything settled, and my dad's funeral wasn't they didn't want it, they wanted to be a celebration of life. And so they had it at the same church that my dad was going to. The same pastor that my dad talked to and consulted with, especially the week that he was in the hospital. And I was very very angry with God, because there are so many worse people out in the world. And you had to take my grandpa, and then 4 years later, you had to take my dad. And I'm like, what did I do to lose like these two most important people like in my life? Like, why would you do that? Instead of taking the one person who was supposed to be in my life, my biological father was supposed to be there. He was supposed to be my dad, but he wasn't. And like, I know that's kind of messed up to say, but I was so angry. And so the pastor that was there at the hospital kind of was like quoting scripture to me. And he was like, well, it says in the Bible that God takes away a father of 4 kids. I said, then I will renounce him as my dad. He's not my dad. Now my dad has 3. Can God help him? And he was like, that's not how it works. He goes, this is the devil speaking to you, trying to bargain with you and all of this stuff. I said, I just want my dad back, and I want him safe and healthy and okay. However that happens, it happens. Like, I want him okay. My ex was like, Lena, come on, let's go outside. Because he knew nobody was going to win with me. Like, it wasn't going to happen. And so I went and saw this pastor that my dad saw, because something in me was like, just go talk to him, go see him, go see him. So I did. And he told me that it was okay to be angry with God. God understands. Because he said that he lost his faith after his wife had a miscarriage. Because he said, why would God give my wife a baby and give us that hope that we're going to have a child and then take it away? So he was very angry with God. And he goes, and it took me a while to get back to my faith. And he said, and so you being angry is okay. And you needing time to understand and to get back to your faith is okay too, because it happens. And he told me, he said, the way, and I explained that I argued with this pastor, which I kind of felt guilty for. And he was like, what he was doing was trying to help you get through this by quoting scripture, but that's not what you needed in that moment. And so we kind of talked for a little bit. And then at my dad's funeral, he was up there. We told stories about my dad and just how amazing he was. And then after the funeral, we all went back to my mom's house to just kind of hang out, celebrate him, drink rum and cokes because that was his drink, and just celebrate his life and just, remember the good times we had with him. So it's still hard. I'm still trying to work through it. Um, Still trying to work through with my grandpa. Um, and I did get back to my faith, and it was one of those things that I never expected that I would have to deal with. And so if this episode helped you at all, please comment where you are in your healing journey. If you have any questions, I try to read all of them and answer them. And if anybody tells you that you were selfish to tell that loved one that's hurting that was dying, if anybody tells you that that was selfish of you, it was not. It was actually the selfless thing to do, to let them go, even though you want them with you. So I hope you guys are safe and be kind to yourself, and we'll see you next time.